Hi everyone, so coming at you with a question that I get pretty frequently, and actually it was asked by one of my clients to me, Steve, so thank you Steve for reminding me to make this video. This is something that I've been wanting to talk about for a little bit, and I have talked about in some of my other videos, but just about training, motivation, bad days. What do you do when you have a bad day of training? Do you adjust your weight? Do you adjust your reps? Do you give up and go home? What do you do? So it really is going to depend on each individual situation. So you have to remember overall that progress is not linear. I get this question all the time. Do you ever have bad training days? Because based on like my Instagram posts or whatever it may be, it seems like days are consistently good. Well, it's taken years and years for me to get to the place where generally I have decent training days consistently. Because I know how to set up my training schedule that best works for me. So I would say that's number one. Communicating, if you have a coach, if you have someone that you're working with, or if you're doing your own training, realizing, okay, so maybe 5 days a week of lifting is too much for me. Maybe I need 4 to feel good. Maybe I work a ton of hours. So is it a good idea to go try to lift after working maybe I don't know, some people work crazy long hours and have shifts that are like 16 hours long. Is it a good idea to maybe try to go to the gym after that? Do you consistently feel bad in the gym after you go in after a really long work day or whatever it may be? I knew for myself, back when I used to work a corporate job in an office, I would typically in the middle of the week have to take a day off because I just did not feel recovered. So that's something that is important to consider. You can't expect your body to be fully recovered if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not, if you're not feeling well. As I speak, I actually am coming down with a cold, so that's something to take into consideration as well. Your sleep schedule, your work schedule. How is it best going to be set up throughout the week that set you up for success? Now, if you've been consistent with a training schedule for a while, then definitely make tweaks to it. If you find that maybe you're not recovering from a leg workout earlier in the week or squats earlier in the week for your second session of squats later in the week, maybe put your heavy day of squats at the beginning of the week because you feel like you have more energy, and then take your lighter day of squats and put it at the end of the week because you feel like you can devote more energy to your squats earlier in the week. But if that's not the case and you've been pretty consistent, then it's important to realize that every single person has bad training days. I myself have terrible training days where I'm just not into it. Mentally I'm just not there. That can be a huge component, especially with powerlifting, I would say. So in bodybuilding, you can, generally you might be hitting for a certain rep range or whatever it may be, and you can kind of adjust, you can self-regulate the weight to how you're feeling. So I would say that this has given me my start was in bodybuilding, and then I've transitioned into powerlifting more so, or I would say, well, my training now is a combination of the two, but my only focus previously was bodybuilding, but now it's a combination of bodybuilding and powerlifting. And as I've gotten into powerlifting, something that I have taken from my bodybuilding days into my powerlifting days is realizing every single day is going to be a little bit different. So if I have a certain number of reps that I want to hit or a weight I want to hit for powerlifting, realizing that I might not have great days, and if I'm pushing a set to failure, it is okay to adjust the weight down. So if you have a couple sessions where you just cannot physically do it, you maybe didn't get enough sleep, or there's outside influences, you're stressed, something's going on in your personal life, it's okay. You can adjust the weight down. It's not the end of the world. I would say the most important thing would be getting in the volume for that prescribed amount or that session. So let's say you have 3 sets of 8 at a certain weight, and you just can't do it. Well, then take the weight down by maybe 10 to 15% and see how that feels. If you can do those reps at maybe an 8 RPE or 8 to 9 RPE, then do that. If you still can't do it and you're totally gassed, then save it for the next day. Maybe move your rest days during the week. It's important to be able to have a flexible training schedule during the week and not feel like you have to do a lift on a certain day, you have to do a lift on this day, unless you're coming up on a meet and you have a taper and you're competing a certain day. I think it's important for the general population, for the majority of people, to be flexible with your schedule. So for me, during the week, like yesterday, I felt good. Normally I have squats and deadlifts on Tuesday. Today's Tuesday. But I felt good, so I was like, well, I'm gonna squat on Monday and then I'm gonna deadlift today. So I, also know that if I do back on a day before I do deadlifts, I know I'm gonna be a little bit fatigued for deadlifts on the next day. So typically I save my back work for the same day that I do deadlifts, or, spread it out a little bit. So that's something to consider, and also be communicating with your coach, maybe your training schedule, and just ask them. If you ask them, most coaches are going to be like, yeah, like let's switch things up and work with you. So it's important to communicate that with your coach. Now, another option that you can do is just taking the reps down. So let's say you have sets of 5 for 3 sets of 5. And you do the weight feels good, but you're just like, oh my God, I'm gonna hit like a 9.5 RPE if I do sets of 5, maybe a certain weight that your coach prescribed for you. Well, then do 5 sets of 3 instead of 3 sets of 5. That's the exact same volume. It's not ideal. These are just options for if you feel horrible. I'm not telling you to go change your training schedule and go against what your coach is saying. No. And a lot of times coaches give you maybe specific weights, but I would say that just as you train yourself, you need to be very aware of how you're feeling. So for me, I do not go past about, I would say, like a 9 RPE on squats or deadlifts, because my goal is not to push to failure. So if you feel like a weight that maybe your coach gave you, or whatever it may be for this training cycle, is pushing like a 9.5 or 10 RPE, then I would take it down. So RPE, just as a little explanation. So like a 7 RPE is 3 reps left in the tank. If you do a set and you're like, oh, I could do 3 more. 8 would be you have 2 more. 8.5 would be maybe I might have had 2 more reps left in the tank for this set. So generally I like to be in the range of like 7.5 to 9 for my sets. Now when it comes to like heavy singles, I typically want to be around a 9 to 9.5 when I get close to a meet. But it's dependent on your training. So like for me, for my clients, I give my clients specific weights that I want them to hit for powerlifting training. So if I have a certain weight that I prescribe for someone, let's say for sets of 5, I would much rather, if they're feeling completely off and things are just going south quickly, I would rather them reduce the weight, get in those sets of 5, and then we can adjust from there. Or if they're just feeling absolutely horrible, then save it for another day and we can make adjustments throughout the week. So I think that that's important to communicate with your coach, and just to see, is your training schedule setting you up for success, and realize like you're gonna have ups and downs. Like I have had so many terrible training days in the past, and I look back and I think at the time I thought that those days were like just the be all and end all. And I look back and I'm like, okay, literally if I'm training 5 days a week, that is like hundreds of days during the year, a couple here and there that are terrible. Let's say even if I have 90% good training days and 10% terrible training days, like in the big picture, you're 90% successful on getting it in. And even those 10% the 10% of days, you can still improve. You can still work. Let's say you feel horrible. Well, then just lighten the weight, work on your cues, work on your skills for powerlifting. If you have a bodybuilding workout, take down the intensity a little bit, maybe increase the reps, get in some volume, get a good pump, feel good about yourself, because I think that the thing that a lot of times people lose sight of is that fitness should be something that is, for the majority of people, should be, when I say the majority of people, there are going to be tough training days where it's going to feel like the weight might be crushing you, or if you're peaking for a meet or whatever it may be. But for the majority of people, like, your workout program should be enjoyable. It should be something that you look forward to. It should be enhancing your life and not like detracting from it. So if you find yourself getting really stressed out for your workouts or whatever it may be, then definitely like take just take a step back and look and think, okay, how could I maybe change up my training schedule or whatever it may be? But realize that like even like elite level athletes, like they have terrible training days, but it's putting it in perspective. I think that that's something that I've been good at because I was an athlete in all throughout when I was younger and even in elementary school, middle school, and high school. So I kind of learned like that training days will be up and down and it's not the end of the world, and you can still, let's say even if you can't hit your weight, well then work on your form, do mobility, do something you've maybe been neglecting in the gym. And if you can't hit the weight, then, you know, reduce it and try to hit it at maybe a lower weight for the same amount of reps and keep the RPE in a manageable range. And if that doesn't work, then move it to another day, or break up the sets, as I mentioned. Instead of 3 sets of 5, do 5 sets of 3. So then communicate that. If you have a coach, communicate that with your coach so they know, so then they can make adjustments to your plan. Because if you're not communicating with your coach, then how are they supposed to know and make adjustments? So yeah, so I hope that this is helpful for you guys, and sort of, you know, realizing that every single person has bad training days and there's ebbs and flows, but as long as you're majority positive, then you'll be making progress in your training program and in the gym. So, and realize too, like outside forces do really affect you. So especially with something like powerlifting, if you're having like a lot of stress in your life or whatever it may be, and you just are physically exhausted, I mean, mental stress takes a toll on you physically, then make adjustments to your training program and figure out something that's sustainable that will work for you in order to help you improve. So, all right, guys, I will talk to you soon.